Welcome to Salish Sasquatch, where we share evidence as well as encounters. We just got back from an amazing trip to Bluff Creek, California. If you're not familiar with Bluff Creek, California, it is home to the most famous piece of Bigfoot evidence that exists, the Patterson Gimlin film. Though many people through the years have claimed to be the one in the suit, all of these claims have been debunked, and this footage has yet to be debunked. And as technology has improved, more and more detail has been pulled out of this amazing footage. Our friend Glenn Rojas, who will also be on the trip, captured some thermal footage that we also would like to share. I usually don't get excited about thermal footage because it's usually a blob, but this one really piques my interest because the way that the subject is moving, very twitchy, so we will share that at the end of the video. First, here's both historical and modern encounters of Sasquatch from the area. Welcome to Bluff Creek.
Jerry Crew was a Catskill operator, and he was one of the main guys up here, always building these roads into the virgin timber. There's never been roads back here. The only way to get back here, the natives would take this long trail, and this was kind of their hunting ground. So when they built virgin timber into here, you know, he was seeing a lot of strange things, hearing a lot of strange stories. But, you know, like I said, he was also a Sunday school teacher in Salyer, and you know, he always carried around like a little piece of tin foil, and he'd do magic for the kids. Very personable guy that everybody trusted, that everybody liked. Had a really good personality, you know. And after he cast those prints, you know, and his name went all over the place, he didn't just disappear into the sunset. He still actively researched up here. He still worked with the researchers and the construction crews and telling this. You know, telling what he saw and what he found, and he'd make maps. He'd sit down and he'd make maps over where he thinks they could find prints and all that. And, you know, he gave this, he drew one map in particular, and he gave this map to Al Hodgson, who was he ran the general store in Willow Creek, and everybody who came to look for Bigfoot would kind of touch base with Al Hodgson. And, you know, when Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin came, Al Hodgson said, you know, I got this map that Jerry Crew made. You guys are going to want it. Gave it to him, and one of the last days that they were up here, you know, they had this idea to go to this place where Jerry Crew had circled, and that was what we now know as the Patterson Gimlin film site.
What's the purpose of the Bluff Creek project?
Oh, that's a good question. Originally, when we started out, it was like Steven Struford and Ian Carton, gentlemen over there. They were looking for the film site. 2010. When I decided to go help them out. Well, my job was just videographer. So I was, at the time, I was just looking for stories, kind of what you're doing, filming and doing different things. And then I thought this would be a great story. And these guys were trying to figure out where this film site was. At that time, I didn't really care. It wasn't like the greatest thing to go to the film site on October 20th and be there by 1:30 to see how the sun is. Yeah, I wasn't into that. I was just looking for a good story. So when I got there, my job was to film. So I started at the visitor center or the museum, and then went to Steven Struford's Bigfoot books. Then I got to see the walls of books and interview him. It was at that point when he was using his blog as a PowerPoint, and he was covering all this information in there. I thought, this is kind of interesting. So then I met them here, and we started looking for the film sites. And within the first couple of days, I now, instead of the videographer, I become the member, number 3. And our goal was to find the film site, which we did. We relocated it. And then the next step was to let everybody know where it was and why it's the site. So we did maps, charts, we gridded areas out, and just so there's no excuse or no reason you can say it's not there.
What got you into Bigfoot, and what got you into the Bluff Creek project?
Well, two different questions. I don't know. You know, I lived on the coast here in Northern California as a child in the 70s when Bigfoot was sort of a new thing, and I don't know. It always had my imagination from being a little kid. And as I've grown up and spent more time in the outdoors, you know, I just realized that there's huge potential. There's so much unknown area out here. Just, you know, it boggles the mind if you're not familiar with the Pacific Northwest, I guess the Western U.S. in general. Something could be out here hiding very easily. No question about that. And then I guess getting involved with the Bluff Creek project was an interesting story. I'd been on the East Coast for years, and then circumstances brought me back to Northern California as an adult. And I started coming up here around 2006 looking for the exact film site, as there was no exact information. Even GPSs were still rare. You didn't have smartphones quite yet. So all the descriptions of getting here were out of date, even ones that were just a few years old. No one could pinpoint it on a real map, no coordinates. So I started looking out here myself, and within a couple of years I'd met up with some other people, and in 2010 we officially decided to call ourselves the Bluff Creek Film Site Project. And within 2 years we had cameras up here year-round, and we identified the film site positively and published exact GPS coordinates.
We're on 12 and 13H, which is the road that leads you down to the berm above the PG site. And it used to be able to drive all the way to the bottom, but they had some slide problems and they went ahead and burned it off. But my earliest memory of this road is during finding Bigfoot, the birth of a legend. I'm up here on top of this ridge where we were just at, which we call the cell site. And I ran over to the edge here and I watched, going down this road, Bob Gimlin, Renee, Bobo, Cliff, and Moneymaker all ride down this on horseback, down this road, with this perfect background of trees.
I don't think it has anything to do with your... No, the body.
What's gorgeous about this ride is this is what the old growth Doug fir forest looks like. We have a minimal canopy underneath of a few live oaks, rhodies. We have a lot of rhododendrons up and down this. You don't see it so much here. Here you can see where a spot fire came through. If you look down here, and it burned the undergrowth, but it didn't burn the old growth trees because this hasn't been logged. They never logged this, so this is its natural progression of fire suppression for itself. It's okay to burn the stuff that grows fast, comes back easy. The trees, though, survive because the burns are low intensity. When we do a lot of logging, and they do a lot of slash burning and clearing, you get a lot of brush buildup. It'll limb up anything. Fires get hotter just because of all the burnability of the ground cover. On an old growth, it can survive. There's another burn scar right there. That's new. That was from 3 years ago. I've camped there many times. When you get to the film site, you're kind of lost if you don't really know the film. It always helps for one of us to be there to really show you how everything worked, show you a picture of the 352. And
What's 352?
frame 352 is the famous picture that you see of Patty walking across the sandbar with her head turned looking back at Bob and Roger. So that's probably the most famous picture of a Bigfoot.
Okay, so what happened?
Well, Jamie and I were out here waiting for the groups to show up. I was parked just over there, and Jamie was parked here more like this, and he had a digital recorder going on the back of his car. And it was like late in the afternoon, his sun's ready to go down. So there was no sunlight here, but you could still see pretty good. And I want to say it's in the fall. So I was playing the flute, and I like to do that. I blow it really loud first to see it echo off the hillsides. And then I was trying to pretend like I knew what I was doing. While I was doing that, Jamie calls me over here, come here. So I came over, and he goes, I'm hearing something down there. It almost sounds like a flute. And I was thinking, it's just the echo. So, okay, so We wait, nothing happens, of course. Then I just blow it really loud, and then we hear it. It's not like a flute coming from down there, echoing back up. And we have birds here, but I've never heard it like that before. So it's
almost
another
like
one of the
something
mysteries.
was mimicking your flute.
Playing better than I was, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I have no idea. And it wasn't an echo because there was enough time between the time I played and the time I heard it. And we do get echoes, like here, it bounces right up here and it hits back this way. And so that's why I like to play it loud, because it kind of echoes down and it travels for a long ways. But yeah, it's playing the flute. It's not the first time I've gotten some weird response. So I just wish I was better. Maybe that's what they're trying to let me know I need to practice more.
So this whole berm part right here, I spent half a day building with logs here and shovels to make this path start off.
What part of Idaho is it?
Boise, Idaho.
There. The little wispy looking maples.
Yeah.
Those are called vine maples. And vine maples are very prominent in the Patterson Gimlin film, especially in frame 352. But this will be important at the frame 352 when I show you guys at the site what's going on with maple growth. And as you can see, there's a branch right there. See your mid branch? That branch will always be at that height. A tree grows from the top up. So there's certain characteristics that will be in this tree that are always going to be there at the same height. This is the slide right here that closed down this road. A guy was coming down in his Jeep and almost went off here. So soon after that, they went ahead and closed this road to any traffic.
That's his initials right here. And somebody stole this and shot holes in it, so he had to replace it with a newer one.
Quartz everywhere. Look at that chunk.
From our initial work with Bob Gimlin and other studies, we ascertained that Patty was first sighted right down here on this side of those two trunks, right in that little hole right there. As she started to walk up out of the bank, she walked right through here and she walked this way. Roger running across the creek right now. He gets set up right where those guys are. She sees that they're crossing the creek, kind of does a little bit of a right, goes right through here, and then ends up all the way to that bank over there. There's a group of fir stumps that are still there that are noticeable in the film. And this is 352, which is the famous pose of Patty, which should be this way. There we go. She looks this way, turns and looks, a little higher kick.
Somewhere on, oh, yeah, you got that right, but it's funny. No, you got to cross your front leg forward.
Who walks like that?
Well, let's see. She does.
Like, what did you think when you realized that this was it?
Well, in our group, I was a holdout for another location downstream. But when we started taking the measurements here, I was convinced. There'd been a massive flood in December of 1964, and that flooded this whole valley out and stripped, a lot of the undergrowth. And it actually changed the course of the creek in a couple of places. That was the environment when they got here in October of '67. And in the years since then, things have regrown. So once you get your head around that and you start looking at landmarks, then it's definitely the film site.
This is some of the old stuff. I keep forgetting who's who, but I think this is his name, but gives you an idea. This is some of the old, this is pretty much after 64, after the flood, which scoured everything out and made it flat. And the film site was done in 67, so you have a few years later, Patty has filmed. But these are the artifacts. And if I just point here, this is the leaning stump. We're going to see that in a second. This is the big stump. This is the smiley stump. Let's take a step over here, if you will. So these are one of the pictures. This is DeHinden's son. This is one of the pictures DeHinden had taken back in '71 where he did the aerial shot. But he was marking it to figure out distances. He did some measurements. There's his son. This O happens to be smiley face, which is out that way. This is the smiley face. This is the big stump, which is right there. And this is the leaning stump, which is right here. But here's smiley stump. And you wonder why we call it the smiley stump? Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah, why do you call it a smiley stump?
That's a good question. So what happened was when this tree was living, it had gotten damaged and it was still alive and it started healing itself. You see the healing spots right here? So it's growing over trying to heal itself, and those had left scars and shapes. From a distance, it looks like a smiley face and a big nose. So therefore, smiley face stump. You're welcome.
Oh, okay.
What we're trying to do now on the Patterson Gimlin film site is make it more approachable and visual, as opposed to when we first got here. It was completely limbed out and dense, full of saplings, and you really couldn't get a scope of the film site or the film area itself as seen in the film because of all the growth. So what we've done now, we've been limbing up these trees with a pole saw, and as you turn now, we're getting further back. We can actually see the big tree, the maple in the middle, and then the other big tree on the right. We came upon these trees probably about here, and I looked up and I saw the maple, which has grown tremendously. So again, here's our big tree over here on the right, and then here is our maple, right, that one right there, which is that maple right there. And as you see, about right the same 10 feet up, it's got its crook in it, just like it had right there. So that crook doesn't change. That's what it looked like 58 years ago. So this has just grown taller and taller. That combination is what got me. As soon as I saw those three and that distinctive crook on that maple, it was definitive to me that there was no other three-tree combination that would match that.
Mm-hmm. Why are you into Bigfoot?
Why am I into Bigfoot? Actually, Bigfoot found me through production. I've been in the film commercial business for 25 years now, and I do location scouting and managing. At first, I didn't think it was that important to know exactly where Patty was filmed, but as I got into the site survey and started seeing the surroundings and realized that was the site, I realized the importance of the film. The film itself is the only physical evidence really that we have of a Bigfoot, because it's a chemical reaction on cellulose. There's no digital print or anything like that, so it's an actual physical thing. So we can extrapolate a lot from the film, and that's really what I focused on. I'm not really a Bigfoot researcher in the fact that I go out and look for Bigfoot and try to have a Bigfoot experience. Of course, I did that the first 6-7 years. We were always out in the woods. But now I realize the importance is just getting as much as we can get out of the film and the film site itself.
That was awesome. It was totally gorgeous. Not what I expected.
I know, huh?
And I'm seeing like seemed like all the trees, the stumps, you know, line
Yeah.
up. It was pretty cool.
And the bluff in the back and that big tree.
Let's hear your best Sasquatch call.
Can you do the screams?
No, man, I can't do like a scream. Like,
All right, let's hear what you got though.
I can do a whoop. Try whoop.
Go for it.
Let's do it. All right.
Whoop!
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
Get everybody to do whoops.
Whoop!
So we're here at Laird Meadow in the Bluff Creek area. This area is pretty significant because in 1964, Roger Patterson had casted a track here in Laird Meadow. And then Bob Titmus also casted a handprint just down the road over here. I think Cliff Berkman was trying to find that pond, and he ended up finding it. And there's a little pond with a little creek that runs into it, but it's kind of overgrown with trees and shrubbery, but it's still there to this day. So this is where I believe Roger Patterson casted that track in '64. And as you can see, there's a good amount of water, and when you get closer, you can kind of hear the ground is a little bit wet. But this is like a good, decent source of water for animals to come and drink, and I think that's what makes Laird Meadow so good for potential Bigfoots being here. It's fresh water right here. And in 2021, I was here with Small Town Monsters, Alex and Eli. So myself and Alex were sitting on that side of the meadow, and then Jonathan Easley and Eli were sitting at that tree right there. And we had a road group, which is kind of beyond those trees over here, and they were walking up that road. And we were having them do calls while we sat in the dark, kind of just listening. And after a call was done on the road, we heard something get thrown behind Alex and I. Something threw something at us. And we don't know what it was, but it was really strange. And then we were doing some more calls, and later on we heard more knocks coming from that direction, but further off. So something was in the area and then kind of left. Then we were hearing more knocks on the road following that incident that same night. And we found these trees coming from the meadow. And this was much healthier back then. It kind of looks dead and brittle now. But we saw that one and it was like broken. And like, that's a weird height. And I feel like if it was a bear, it probably would have bent the whole tree and did something more.
Heavy snow?
Scratches. No, it wasn't snow. Because the pine needles were still green at the time. Then we come over here and it's a little shorter. And we found this. And it's almost like it was broken and twisted. You can kind of see how it looks like there's a twist in it. And that was just really bizarre. And across the meadow is where Damon found that hair, which we had analyzed, or he had analyzed by Cliff, and it had no medulla and a blunt end, which is what you look for characteristics of Squatch hair. And so that was all here in the same year.
It's beautiful, but it'd even be more beautiful if the trees hadn't burned up.
Indeed.
Okay, tell me a Bigfoot story from here.
Well, we're at Onion Lake, which is just off the Mountain Road, and you may recall the most common incident that happened here was in early 1967 when the Onion Mountain tracks were found all along the roadway. Some claim they were real, some claim they were fake by Wallace and his friends. Personally, I don't think Wallace's fakes match the tracks, but other people have other opinions, and that led to a little while later, John Green and all of them came up here to look at the tracks, went home, and they got called back again a few weeks later when tracks were found in the vicinity of Blue Creek Mountain. And of course, that was about 3 weeks before the PG film was shot. But Onion Mountain here, a long history, especially them footprints in '67 that were found right on the main road. The one we were on when we came in here. Yeah, that's basically the history. As for a sighting right here in Onion Lake, the very spot where we're at right now, I haven't heard of a single one. Now, in the springtime, does this area flood? I'm wondering why this stays open like this. Why the forest doesn't close in. Because this looks the same as it did back in the 80s.
All right, it was, I think 2022 was it, Tate? 2023 or so, Jonathan Easley and I were sitting here in the dark late night. Had two groups doing a night investigation. The group below did a call, and a few minutes later, Jonathan and I heard a response, loud, almost like a roar type sound, which we heard the following year also. But Jonathan had a audio, I think Ron had an audio recorder, and he had ruined it up in Alaska, but I had my cell phone at that time and I was recording, and we were able to faintly catch the audio on that. But it was interesting that in the same area, following year, doing the same thing, night investigation, a couple of groups, same thing, did a call and got a response again. And actually that time we headed up towards Onion Mountain, where we thought the audio was coming from, and didn't find much there. But yeah, something about this area that we like, that, you know, we feel that there's stuff going on here at times.
We'll go 150 yards past that bridge right there. That's the bridge that Jerry Crew and those loggers helped put in. And there's a guy named Jay Rowland who's still around today. He was around back then in the logging era, and he worked with Jerry, and he saw the prints that Jerry cast. He also saw a lot of other prints, because that was kind of like a, I don't want to say epidemic, but it was a thing that was going on here with multiple construction crews in different places. You had crews building roads in miles away, and here's the creepy thing: when these loggers would show up in the morning, they would find their equipment tampered with, things pushed over, oil barrels thrown into the creek, and they'd go back to the town and talk about it, maybe at the bar, and other people would report the same thing. Other logging crews would report the same thing, so they'd all come together and connect.
Yeah, well, Louse Camp was where the Wallace Corporation headquartered when they were building the Bluff Creek Timber Access Road. And they come back and they had all their supplies, equipment, and oil and fuel cans here for their machinery. And when they were away and at night, something came and threw full barrels of oil, diesel oil and diesel fuel into Notice Creek right here.
All right, so this little outcrop right here is pretty important. Everybody's heard about this crazy story about these giant oil barrels thrown in the creek. What happened was they had a shed. Something had pried open the shed and then carried the oil barrels. In other words, these things weigh like 500 pounds, and you'd have to drag them between a couple guys, if sort of strong guys, or use heavy machinery. These were taken. There were no drag marks, and just right here on the other side is where they found them in the morning when they came to work. So these guys were like showing up and having to do cleanup jobs after these Bigfoots would come through and, tamper with all their equipment. So it delayed jobs. Can you imagine the explaining that you had to do to your boss, to the people in town, to the contractor? Sorry, we're a little late on the job. Bigfoot threw our stuff in the creek.
And just up there, where he's coming down now, is where a culvert of a trailer culverts was tipped over and scattered. So that's when really the first hint that something strange was going on, because that was before Jerry Crew found his tracks around the bulldozer. Yeah.
Jerry Crew played a role from 1958 all the way to 1967 when it came to the Bigfoot phenomenon up here. Jerry Crew was a Sunday school teacher, and he didn't like to be called a liar. So he talked to a guy named Bob Titmus in town, who taught him how to make a plaster cast. So next time he came up here, he sits up on his construction machine and looks around and sees these footprints. He found one good one, made a plaster cast of it, took it back to Bob Titmus, and Titmus went from thinking he was being punked to fully believing that it's a real creature. And that's how Bob Titmus became involved, because he was convinced by this footprint. That's the same footprint that you see in the Humboldt Times in 1958, where he's kind of holding it up like this. And it was just supposed to be a little article in the Humboldt Times, but the AP News picked it up that day, and it went nationwide. And in that article, he said, you know, I don't know, this Bigfoot keeps coming around our construction site. And that's how Bigfoot was coined, right here.
Technically, right now, we're in Louse Camp, so it gets a little complicated with the counties. I know several counties meet in this area, but I lived for many years, over 10 years, in Humboldt County, which is part of the area up here. We were on private property. We had a piece of land in southern Humboldt County, up in the Alder Point area, which is also known as Murder Mountain. 40 acres, heavily wooded piece of land. I was actually headed up to the top part of the property on a summer day. I remember a hot day. It was in my pickup truck going down our private dirt road. It must have been like 5 miles an hour or so. I had my phone next to me on the passenger seat, and on both sides of the road, it's heavily wooded. On my left side, I noticed what looked like a humanoid figure, and it was from my peripheral vision. It looked like a black silhouette, not a huge person, maybe an average sized person, 5'6", 5'7" or so maybe. And so I stopped my truck, and I noticed at the base of this oak tree, in the same area where I'm looking at, I noticed a head at the bottom of this tree. And it's interesting because there's a piece of thermal footage that you're going to be checking out at some point. And it kind of reminds me of that also, because it was at the base of a tree. And so I could only see a black head and what looked like eyes. And around the eyes, maybe I would imagine there was maybe skin, because it was a different color under there. It was kind of a dark grayish color. And the eyes, I didn't see anything that stood out. It looked like the normal eyes to me, so they weren't like red or any strange color. They seemed to be bigger than our eyes. And we have this staring contest, I can't tell you for how long, and at one point that staring session just broke up. I can't tell you how it happened or what. I just remember going about my business and heading to the top part of the property. Our area is known for Sasquatch activity. Actually, down the hill from us on 101, you can find a lot of reports on different databases, and I've heard a lot from the locals.
We were up here one day, and we were talking about those very same footprints, and they were kind of going over the historical aspect of it right in the spot when Ron's dog Bandit had walked past us and walked up here and stood there for a second, and he tucks into the bush. And, I didn't think much of it. And I was standing here, and I had just met one of Ken Gerhardt's friends, like literally just shook his hand, and we're standing here in a circle, and we hear these two really loud, what sound like wood knocks down in the creek, and both of us turn our head. Did you hear that? That was pretty wild. That was really loud. And, okay, well, we came back to the conversation, and we started walking back, and Ron's walking past us going, have you guys seen Bandit? I go, yeah, Bandit's down there. I just saw him. So we keep walking back, and Ron starts saying, hey guys, do you have like a rope or something? And I go, yeah, I got a belt. So I'm coming back and I'm meeting Ron halfway, who's dragging his dog back. This dog has hiked the entire Appalachian Trail. It's been around every animal in the North America, pretty much, like bears, mountain lions, and he's never freaked out like this. Ron was very adamant that he never freaked out like this. So we made a leash out of my belt, and Ron dragged Bandit back, and he was paws like this all the way back here. And the craziest part was that once we got back here, there's a group, and there's like two guys from the group standing there, shining their flashlights in the tree, going, something huge just ran through here. I go, was it a deer? He goes, I don't know, something huge just ran through here. And as we get back to camp, I walked back to the fire ring, and Alex Petikoff is filming Bandit, still like pacing in circles, all freaked out. And as he's filming that, you hear this whoop come from up on top of the hill. So you had a chain of event of three things happen. Bandit getting really terrified, and those knocks, these guys saying something ran through there, and then when we get back to camp, Alex records this whoop, and that happened all in a matter of like 5 minutes. So it's just one of those really weird things. And people, for some people, history can get a little boring, but when things are still happening in the exact spot that this history took place, it's kind of neat. They're all connected, right?
Okay, Mandy, give us a breakdown of how we're related, who we came from.
My name's Mandy. So Jonathan and I are cousins on my dad's side and his dad's side. So our dads were first cousins. I've lived in Humboldt County my whole life. I'm from Blue Lake, a member of the Wiyot tribe. Our family is Yurok and Wiyot. And our people come from the Mad River on the Wiyot side, and our Yurok people come from the Big Lagoon area up to Metah Village on the Klamath, and kind of the surrounding areas down to the Trinidad area as well. I have a degree in Native American Studies from Humboldt State. Now it's Cal Poly Humboldt, but it was Humboldt when I graduated from there. I worked for the Yurok tribe for 16 years in the planning department and spent a lot of time up and down the river, working on tribal projects, working in tribal communities to build infrastructure, community facilities, and have spent my life growing up between Blue Lake and Willow Creek. My family had a cabin in Willow Creek, and so we spent a lot of time on the Trinity River as well as the Mad River and Blue Lake. So I always kind of say that I grew up between Blue Lake and Willow Creek as kind of my home area. I mean, I've always been interested in Bigfoot. Growing up in Willow Creek as a kid, Bigfoot was a big thing there. And I've always been interested in it from a cultural standpoint, which I think is, it's kind of a balance that you have to strike, between the kind of the pop culture side of Sasquatch and then balancing that with the cultural side, which is really important. It's interesting to be able to, be out and participate and, see how science and culture are starting to kind of bridge together to be able to provide some answers, I think, on kind of a larger landscape. I have a coworker and a good friend of mine that was driving over Bald Hills Road, and her husband saw something run across the road that they both said was definitely not a bear, that they definitely know what bears look like. We all know what bears look like growing up here. Lots of stories of people having different experiences on the river, whether it's, something throwing rocks or hearing different sounds or seeing things on the ridge lines. So there's a lot of stories from tribal people and non-tribal people both in these local areas that I think are really interesting.
It's kind of funny when like you can talk to an Indian and they'll tell you like face to face, like after they trust you a bit, they'll tell you about their stories.
Yeah.
But like getting them to like publicly like tell their stories, that's a completely different thing.
Yeah, I think that, I think there's a lot of, like I said, there's that balance on the cultural side, especially with, with tribal people, is, we've all heard stories, and, whether it's a story that's there as part of kind of a life experience, guidance, teaching moment, or if it's, something that's a real true experience, it's hard to separate those sometimes. You hear about, experiences in the woods, don't whistle in the woods, the little people and things. And, you, on one hand, you can say, oh, that's a story to try and, teach children, how to, not to run off. But is it really, or is it a true cultural experience that we need to respect and be mindful of? And so that's kind of where I see this issue is, we hear the stories of Omaha and the you know, the negative side of that, and you know, the hairy man and all these things. And on the other side, you know, it's exciting to think like, oh, maybe I will see Bigfoot.
In the northern part of the county, Humboldt County, in a town called Trinidad, and it's a small fishing town. And I was headed out of the town southbound on Highway 101, and it was evening time. I remember the sun was setting. It had just rained, and you know, things were visible, wet outside. And when I got onto the on-ramp of the highway, I noticed 3 or 4 other cars already ahead of me. And at the same time, I noticed on the opposite side of the highway what looked like a tall, skinny, humanoid figure, taller than a normal person. And again, it was all just completely black. I couldn't see any hair hanging or anything. It was just like a humanoid cutout, black cutout. And this subject starts walking across the highway. And I figured when it gets to our side of the highway, these cars that were ahead of me are gonna have to stop or swerve, honk, or do something, because I'm almost positive they're gonna see this subject. And so when I get to the point where I'm thinking this is all gonna happen, nothing happens. The cars drive by, and so I'm expecting whoever this is or whatever this is to be on my side of the highway, which on my side it's a steep ravine of nothing but redwoods, and if you keep going down, you end up on the beaches of Trinidad there. And when I passed by where I was expecting to see this, there was nothing there. And so I can't tell you what happened, but the subject did cross the highway. And so I'm just figuring maybe it made it completely across and I didn't see it, and down the ravine.
So I was told that when Roger had filmed the footage here on Bluff Creek, I had heard at that point it was a salmon-bearing river, and that was in '67. Can you say anything about the dams and how that has impacted fish runs?
Yeah, so it's been a really exciting year. The Yurok tribe and the Karuk tribe and the different communities and agencies have been successful in taking down several of the dams on the Klamath. It's probably one of the more historic aspects of salmon restoration that we've seen probably since the dams actually went up. So, you know, it's going to have amazing impacts. It's going to take a while for the rivers to be able to, you know, to recover and stabilize those ecosystems, but you know, we're well on our way to seeing, you know, that restoration happen, and removal of the dams is going to have broad and far-reaching effects. Everyone hopes that, you know, this is kind of a linchpin moment for restoration of those salmon runs and the health of the river.
And you're also big on fishing too.
Yeah, I love to fly fish. I spent a lot of time on the Klamath and on the Trinity. I fished the Mad River, the lagoons, and so yeah, it's, you know, the health of the river is something that's really important, you know, for me as, you know, just an avid, you know, outdoors person, but also as someone who cares, you know, deeply about, you know, this place and where we come from and that history. This is a monumental moment, and it's just so exciting to see, and we're going to be seeing it for generations, that impact.
Last night or early this morning, it was around 4 a.m. We were up late last night, and around 4 we all headed to our tents. Actually, it was Jonathan Easley and I left at the end of the night, and we headed to our tents and I settled in. A few minutes after that, I started noticing what seemed like a light coming from behind my tent, and as you can see, I'm at the edge of the campground here. There's nobody behind me. It's nothing but bushes. It actually drops down to the creek also in this area. And it was very strange how the light was moving. And my phone is actually full of data right now, so I was able to make a little bit of space and was able to record a little bit of this strange light. And I'm calling it strange because Again, everyone else was asleep. There's no other people in this campground other than the group that is already here. It seemed like almost every 2 or 3 minutes or so, and it was happening for about a half hour, maybe longer. And then I started noticing it sounded like footsteps around here. And I'm not gonna say bipedal, it just sounded like something was out here. So it could have been an animal. I've never seen any bear. There's bear and wildlife around here, but I've never seen them in the campground here. And so yeah, I felt the presence of something. And then I also at one point heard it sounded like a rock, maybe like a medium-sized rock that was dropped, not thrown, dropped, and then you hear a thud, and then it rolled. It sounded like maybe a couple times.
The geology is quite diverse here. As you can see, we got all the gray rock. I'll defer to Jamie for what that is. But then you have here in the middle, you have a different kind of rock. You see how it's more smoothed out. Seems like it's a little more hard. It's got more fleck in it. And then look right down here. There's a big old piece of white. I don't think that it could be quartz. And then you see many different colors here. But the whole area of Northern California is really diverse in this rock.
And then you got the spaceship down there. Crash spaceship. Looks like it, doesn't it?
All right, so this experience happened in Southern California, in the Angeles National Forest. We decided to go to a campground. It was my younger brother, 2 of my nephews, which are both 18 and had never been camping. And I chose this spot that I had seen a report online in 1995. It was a couple that were near this campground called Chilao. And it was 1 in the morning or so, and the couple had gone to the restroom, and they were walking back to the car and supposedly seen some sort of humanoid, tall black figure. And so I thought that was interesting. I decided to camp there. It was about an hour from the big city where we're staying at. And so we get in there, and actually right before we got to the campground, Chilao, there was a CHP covering the road completely with its siren, with its lights on. And so we had to stop there. There was a car that nearly went off the mountain. It was on the other side of the railing, so they had to clear that up. They told us it would be about a half hour. Anyway, that got cleared up. We were getting ready to go. CHP comes over and tells us that, asks us what we were doing up there. We told him we were gonna go camping, and he told us to be careful because there's been some cult murders in the area. And we were like, whoa, all right. And I kind of knew of stuff like that happening before, but I didn't know in this particular area. So anyway, we set up camp. It's about 10:30 at night. Very windy night and pretty cold for Southern California standards. So we set up shop, and we start walking the campground using our thermal imagers. I gave one of my nephews my newest thermal, and I was just using my phone. So my brother had night vision, 2 of my nephews had thermal. And we're walking around for a bit, and then we got towards the front of the campground, and my nephew started notifying us that he was getting hit. So I was just like, just make sure you record. He wasn't explaining what he was seeing. He just was seeing something on the thermal imager. So he was recording, and yeah, we got a couple hits, and we headed back to the campground. And we didn't know what we had until we got back the following day. The next day we did a quick day hike to a little ridge that was nearby. Didn't find much, and we headed back home. And when I was reviewing the thermal imager that one of my nephews was using, I spotted some wildlife. I think it was like a deer and a coyote. But then I came to this one subject that was at the base of a tree, and it looked very humanoid, and it tripped me out, and I had to go over it several times, and then I sent it to my nephew, and then sent it to a few other people that I trust. Out of all of us that were there, we don't think it was a person, because we don't feel like someone would be camping in that particular area. And the subject was, again, at the base of a tree. You could see the head and about maybe half of the body or so. And at one point, my nephew points at the subject, and he tries zooming in. And it's weird, the thermal that we have, you could zoom in, I think it's like 4 times, and then it'll take you back. After you pointed at it, the subject seems to like put its arm maybe over its face or something like that. It covers itself, it seems like, and ducks. All right, he's about to show us.
It was probably like this, because I remember it looking a little flared like around this area,
Mm-hmm.
and then I locked onto it for a bit, and I was looking at it for a few seconds, and then it kind of just like ran off.
Mm-hmm.
But like not just like stand all the way up and run off.
Yeah, it stayed low.
Down and it was like,
huh.
Type run.
That's strange, man. And then that was after that other thermal hit or before it?
That was the first thermal hit.
Okay.
We didn't catch that one on camera.
All right. And so that was on this side of the camping area, up in the middle part here. If you check out some of the day videos, you'll see some of this area, and there's like rocks and trees and whatnot, and like little hills and some plenty of cover and stuff and places to like hide. Yeah. And the thermal hit is on the other side of that, just about the same area, if not a little further up. So all within this area that happened. So
I was sitting in this chair right before dark tonight, and right over there, from that tree over to here, darted something so incredibly fast, and it looked identical to Will Ulmer's drawing that he did, except it ran so fast from there to there. There's only 3 of us here in camp right now. I'm just trying to rule out everything. A bear can't run that fast on 2 legs. Person, I don't know how a person would maneuver their body in such a way that they would not make a sound running across this. And everything it appeared to be black. Now it's dark, so maybe in the daylight could have been dark brown, I don't know, but appeared to be black. And it was in the running motion, but just like Will Ulmer's drawing. I can't stop thinking about it. I was about to go to bed, but now I can't stop thinking about that. What the heck? Like, I don't even know what to say to the camera. I don't even know what to think about. Something running from this to this that fast without making a sound. Action!